Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are at the point where we're ready to advance our quilt. So this row is finished. We've gotten to the end of this row. Now the first thing I like to do is I will click the last row that I finished. So this red row is the one that just finished stitching. Okay, so now we need to advance our quilt and use our sew head to tell the computer where we're at. So I've unlocked my backing rail here, and we're just going to advance the quilt. And what's important when I do that is that I make sure that I leave enough room, because this design, you can see, nests pretty deep here. So I need to make sure I have room to quilt all of that in this next pass. Okay? The next thing I like to do is I'm going to smooth everything out and then baste my sides. Okay? And because we're working with this Minky, I'm going to clip my side clamps on. We're going to go this way. And that way everything is held where it needs to be. So let's go ahead and get our sides basted here. And I like to use 4 stitches per inch when I baste my sides. I just find that it holds a little bit better than 2 stitches per inch. Okay, now we go to the other side. And I also like to, as I advance the quilt and work through, I like to baste from the backing bar back towards the dead bar. If you have anything you need to ease in, sometimes that'll help kind of even things out, spread out the extra. This one's looking pretty good though. Okay. So once I've done that, I have a laser light on this machine. So I've got it turned on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a point. So let's say a point that is one of these leaves. So if we're looking on the screen here, these points here where these leaves come down. So I'm going to pick the higher one because this design nests and I want to make sure it's going to fit. So I pick the point of that leaf, and then I go over to the sew head and I'm going to choose my Realign. We're going to choose snap to point. I'm going to zoom. I know it's this one. Remember, I clicked it red so I could tell once I zoomed in. And now this is the point I chose. So this is where I put the sew head. So I'm going to click right there. Green check mark. I always double check too that this looks right, like this looks lined up, and it looks good. So now I'm going to go back to full view and now see my safe area has moved down. So I always click this row that I'm about to stitch just to make sure, okay, everything fits nicely in my safe area. That looks good. And now we're going to go trim the sides down. Now, depending on your quilt, if your quilt is nice and straight like this one, I can keep trimming based on the previous trim line. But if I'm not sure, I can always take the sew head and move it. So I'm going to move it over to the left side. And I just kind of run it along here. What this also does is if I need to use that angled trim, I can see that as I run the machine up and down. The left side's pretty straight though, so I'm just going to trim on the vertical. The crosshair is where I need to trim. I'm going to invert that because the black is what's being trimmed away. Green check mark. And then I'm going to go over to the right side and we're going to trim that side down. And we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to just place the sew head and just run it back, and that looks good. So we're going to trim on the vertical, right where my crosshair is. This one you don't need to invert because it automatically goes to the right. Green check mark. And then again, I like to go back to full view. You can zoom in if you want a little bit. But now everything looks good, so I'm ready to start stitching. I hit play. It's telling me I have designs queued outside the safe area. Okay, yes, we want to DQ and proceed. And we want it to start at the start point because we're starting a new row. And then it'll move down, and then we'll be ready to start stitching this new row.